The city of Indianapolis is facing a major budget crisis for next year. Tough choices have to be made, likely affecting public safety. Today, we're sitting down with representatives from both sides who must work out a compromise on the city budget. City Council President Maggie Lewis and Communications Director for Mayor Greg Ballard, Mark Lauder. Then, new poll numbers are out in some of the key races Hoosier voters will decide in November. Our political panel will debate what these numbers mean. It's all coming up on this edition of Indianapolis This Week.
From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
A battle over the city's proposed budget is coming soon, and the public safety is going to be a big part of that conversation. Hello, everyone. I'm Todd Connor. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Indianapolis This Week. Much of the weight from that shortage is falling on the shoulders of our police and firefighters. The mayor told the City County Council this week that those unions will have to give back their promised pay raises. Here's a look at how the mayor's presentation with the City County Council went this past week.
The cost of health insurance and pensions continue to escalate. This budget reflects those higher costs.
It was standing room only as Mayor Greg Ballard presented his proposed budget for 2013, and it's not one many plan to take sitting down.
The fact that they will have to share the yeoman's share of the cuts, the budget reductions, has me very concerned for public safety generally in this county, and also for our future ability to obtain funding.
But Mayor Ballard says something has to give. Tax revenue is down, with income taxes down nearly $50 million from just 2 years ago. To help remedy that shortfall, he wants to reopen police and firefighter union contracts and take back $5.5 million in promised pay raises.
The budget before you today is built with those same principles in mind and funds critical services of the city and county without base funding cuts in any agency.
The mayor also wants to take cash from various sources, among them the Rainy Day Fund, and rescind the homestead credit for property owners.
It's not lost on us that the mayor tonight is proposing a property tax increase on homeowners.
And joining us now is the president of the City County Council and representative of the 7th District, Maggie Lewis. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
The mayor, when he presented it to the council, said that it's fully funded and fiscally responsible. Now, I know you're still waiting to see the full copy of the budget, but from what you know so far, any reason to doubt that it's fully funded and fiscally responsible?
You know, I haven't received the detailed information regarding the budget. I'm not exactly sure if it truly is balanced. There's a homestead deduction that we have to take a look at, and I know my colleagues have not agreed to that. So that we're looking at $8 million for that piece alone.
And I know one of your colleagues called that homestead exemption a tax, that the mayor is proposing a tax on the people of Marion County. Is that how you view that?
Exactly. If we eliminate that, their property taxes will go up, and so that's a tax increase.
But times are tight. The state has done away with the homestead exemption. You know, what's wrong with Marion County doing the same thing in order to meet the budget that we have to meet?
Everything is on the table, but at this point, I think it's important that we have a serious conversation about that, because it is a tax increase.
From what you know, what the mayor told you the other night at the council meeting, what concerns you most about his proposed budget?
I am concerned about the elimination of the homestead credit. I am concerned about the officers not being able to receive their raises. Every day they get out and sacrifice their lives so you and I can be safe at night throughout the day, and so I'm concerned about that.
The mayor pointed out in previous years that the officers had received raises of like 3%, 4%, and 5% respectively, but this year it's just not going to be able to happen, and that his administration has reopened the negotiations with both the police and the fire unions. You know, times are tough.
Times are tough. Everything's on the table, but once again, these folks get out and risk their lives every single day for you and I, and to say that they cannot get their raises, that do concern me. And why are we going to try to balance the budget on our officers?
Have you heard back from the men and women in blue? I mean, have they contacted you and
Yes.
said, hey, Maggie, we need some help here?
Yes.
Is there anything you can do?
Yes, I've had several conversations from members of FOP, from the officers. They've reached out to me, and they're concerned about their raises, but also not having the tools that they need every day to get out and do their jobs, and that concerns me.
A lot of folks out there, though, haven't had raises in several years.
Right.
So this wouldn't be out of the ordinary for a person not to get a raise for a year. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
are they going to have to bite the bullet, so to speak, like a lot of folks?
I agree. However, there were some raises that were just issued maybe a couple of weeks ago, and so those folks received their raises. Why not the men and women in blue?
You're talking about some raises to the mayor's
Absolutely,
administration as high as
absolutely.
20-some%.
Yes, and so that could have been those could have been dollars that those officers received.
So is that going to be your major bargaining point when it comes to making sure the fire and the police unions keep their raises? Is saying, Mayor, you know, look what you just did. You know, why can't you do it for these folks, or do you have something else
I think that's part of the conversation. Once again, everything is on the table, and then once we do know that those individuals did receive those raises, and that could have been dollars that went to IMPD.
But from what the mayor said, the unions knew that, you know, if there's a decrease in property tax revenue, then the raises just can't happen.
Right, right.
And so they knew that going into the negotiations.
Right. And I agree, times are hard, but I look at this budget as a draft. Everything is on the table. Let's make sure that we are not missing anything. I look forward to having the conversations with the mayor and the administration to see how we can truly present a balanced budget to our city.
Talk a little bit more about the staffing levels of the public safety department. I mean, police, IMPD, they're at some levels we haven't seen in a while. Some of the lowest points we've seen. We're going the wrong direction, it would seem to many people.
Right. We're already short 100 officers, and if we continue at this rate, we're looking at maybe 200, 250 officers short.
But the mayor is blaming a higher cost of health care and maintaining pensions as being one of the reasons that can't add any new officers. Is there anything the Democrats or the council will work to do to try to maybe soften the blow a little bit and work on maybe those pensions or the health care costs and try to lower that so we can add some officers?
Once again, once I receive that detailed budget, we will take a look at it and see if there's some other opportunities and places that we can shift some dollars throughout the budget.
The mayor also says he's going to borrow from the rainy day fund, 17 million, 20 million from some other agency funds. I know you haven't seen it, but the rainy day fund, is it rainy right now?
It's raining, so I have absolutely no problem with us taking those dollars and plugging them back into the budget. So that's one thing that the mayor and I do agree upon.
And you also agree on the so-called fuel surcharge for the officers?
Yes.
Those who take home their cars?
Yes,
you're on board
I'm
with
on
that?
board with that. I'm on board with that. And so there's two things that the mayor and I are on the same page.
What's going to be the big, difficult hump that you have to get over from what you've heard in discussions with the mayor to reach a compromise by October 15th?
I think the biggest conversation piece is going to be the reduction or the elimination of the homestead credit. We're looking at $13 million. Once it gets down to the city county general funds, we're looking at $8 million to plug in the shortfall. And so I think that's going to be the biggest conversation. Are we willing to look at a tax increase to balance this budget?
It's really not that much per person, though. Are you willing to make this your fight?
I'm not sure it's about making it a fight. It's about figuring out, can we balance the budget without that $8 million?
Okay. All right. All right. Still a lot of time before you have to come up with a final proposal. You have a couple of months ahead. We'll be following it closely and hope to have you back.
Thank you so much.
Maggie, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
After the break, we are going to hear about the mayor's budget proposal from a representative of the mayor's office. Communications Director Mark Lauder will be joining us. Don't go away. As we showed you earlier, it was a standing room only crowd to hear Mayor Ballard's budget proposal to the City County Council this week. Joining us now is the Communications Director for Mayor Ballard, Mark Lauder, who has been involved in Indiana politics for nearly the past 10 years. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Todd.
The mayor's not here. He can't be here. He's actually out of town drumming up some business.
He's actually overseas in China right now. He's on about a week-long visit over there, along with the stop in Taipei, Taiwan, with Develop India and the Greater Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce, looking to drum up some business and make new business connections over there.
All right. Well, glad to have you, and
Thank
hopefully
you.
the mayor comes back with something in his pocket. Is the mayor prepared to fight for his budget the way it is, or does he see some compromise in the next 2 months?
Well, this budget process is about the same, and it will go through the same process as it does every year. The mayor introduces a proposed budget, and whether it was last year under the Republican leadership of the council or this year, there will be changes made to it. The council last year made a number of changes to the budget, so this is just the beginning of the process. The mayor understands that, and we fully expect that the next 2 months the budget will be changed and adjusted, and then we'll obviously eventually come to the end of the road and have something hopefully that everyone can agree to.
He said he's asked his folks to open up negotiations again with the police and fire unions to, you know, tell them, look, we need the money back. We can't give you the raise that you would have liked and that we talked about previously. How confident are you and how confident is the mayor that it will yield the results that you're looking for?
Well, ultimately, we have to do something in the long term to set the public safety system on a long-term path for fiscal stability. Since 2008, when Mayor Ballard came into office, the police and fire unions have received 14% raises since 2008. Even as the city was going into the heart of the recession and the property tax caps, under Mayor Ballard, the city honored 3%, 4%, and 5% back-to-back years in raises for police and fire. And so this is something that they knew was in the budget, that if the revenue didn't meet the expectations, that we would renegotiate those. And we'll look forward to sitting down with both of those unions, having a serious conversation about setting the fiscal course, not just for next year and for the year after, but really we need to set the course for public safety for the next 10 to 20 years on what it's going to look like in Indianapolis.
It would seem those were tougher years financially, yet now you're asking for no raise. Why now and why not 3, 4, 5 years ago when you know the recession was around? And
well, Mayor Ballard thought that the budget could support it at that point. We made additional cuts. The non-public safety agencies, since Mayor Ballard's taken office, have taken 5% cuts in their baseline funding each and every year for the past 4 years. There's really not just a lot of fat left to squeeze out of those non-public safety agencies. And public safety and criminal justice represent 85% of the general fund in the city and the county. When you're talking about a $65 million funding gap, that's really the biggest part, and we have to take a look at it. Just this year's budget from 2012 to 2013, we increased spending by $20 million just in police, fire, and the sheriff to maintain what we have. No raises, no additional hiring. It's going to cost $20 million more next year than it did this year just to maintain what we have, let alone add anything else.
just for the status quo. I think some are worried about the morale in the police department. Their numbers are spread thin. I know they're going to zone policing and have been doing for some time, and there's some criticism over that they're not covering all parts of the city like they should. There's an 8% rise in violent crime this year compared to last year. You know, how do you then say we've got to take something else away from you when you're spread thin and things aren't going so well right now?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to make sure that we're focusing, and Mayor Ballard wants to make sure that the city is focusing its public safety resources where they can do the most good. Many cities across this nation have gone to zone policing years and years before the city of Indianapolis has. That's something that the FOP has fought. It's an efficiency measure that says that if there are areas that are experiencing higher crime, that's where we should dedicate most of our police resources. And the mayor, under Director Straub and the police chief, we're looking at making sure we have the resources targeted to the areas where they need to be and being more efficient with what we currently have, and not always just saying, oh, the answer is always more money, more money. Let's become as efficient and modern as we can with crime in the areas that it's taking place.
One of the first things that a Democratic council member said after the mayor's proposal was that the mayor is adding a tax, talking about the homestead exemption being done away with. Is the mayor comfortable with that being called a tax, and he's taxing the folks?
Well, what I would tell you is that it's costing the city and the county $13 million to provide about $4.5 million in property tax relief. Back in the era before property tax caps, this credit subsidy was the state and local government's best source of protecting taxpayers against large increases in their property taxes. Now in the area of property tax caps, that's no longer necessary. The 1% cap is there. It is the protection. We're one of only a few counties that still offer that, that subsidy.
Is it a tax?
What I would tell you is that when you pay $13 million and you only get $4.5 million in benefit out of it, that's wasteful government spending when we could use that $8 million to go someplace like public safety. I mean, we're talking about public safety needing more resources and maintaining the existing resources we have. This is wasteful government spending where we're spending $3 on average for about every dollar we get out of it.
In about 20 seconds, if you can, anything the mayor isn't willing to give up in his budget that he's going to fight hard for?
I think this is going to be, I would say that the mayor would, the one thing he won't tolerate will be putting us further into debt in future years. There's no borrowing in this budget. There is no taking of the fiscal stability fund, rebuild Indy money, and every dollar that the council wants to add to that is another dollar we're going to have to find next year or the year after next, and so he's not going to allow it to go to be a funding cliff that we can't afford.
All right, Mark Lauder, Communications Director for the Mayor. Thanks for coming by. I appreciate it. Still ahead, the Senate race looks like it's going to be a sprint to the finish, while the other big race looks pretty one-sided right now. We're going over the latest polls in those races with our political insiders after the break. Joining us now, our political insiders, Republican Robert Vane, who was once a Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Greg Ballard, and Democrat Kip Tu, the former chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party. Gentlemen, as always, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Some new polls coming out last week. The governor's race shows Mike Pence with a commanding lead over John Gregg, 50 to 32%. Any surprises? It's a little tough for Mr. Gregg.
Well, I think that the poll's taken way too early. John just got on TV this week, and his opponent's been on the air for 6 weeks, I think it is, or maybe even longer, and has had 6 commercials. So
is that a money thing?
John's on the air now, and I think that you will see very quickly that those numbers getting closer.
You think that will really change things a lot?
No, I don't, because if you're still trying to define yourself 75, 80 days outside of the election, that's bad news. I mean, there's probably more people at Gen Con this weekend who have heard of John Gregg in the entire state. According to that poll, 59% of the people in that poll have never even heard of him. I mean, that's an astounding figure this late into it. The poll basically confirmed what we've already known. Mike Pence has run a very good campaign. He has a commanding lead. He's not resting on his laurels, though. The engine's still going to be running full blast, but it's good news for Republicans.
I heard you gasp.
Well, I mean, I think it's what he's got to say, because they're trying to do everything they can to dampen down our enthusiasm, dampen down our money, but it's only August. Folks haven't made up their minds yet. It's true John Gregg has a name ID issue, but that's exactly why I think he's going to make up so much ground so quickly, because as people get to know he's a Democratic candidate, he's going to come right up in the polls. It's going to be a very competitive race.
Would you rather be in our position or yours?
I'd rather let's wait till November to decide who's going to win, and I think he has been aggressive the last month. Politico, I think, said that he won the month of July, so I think that the race is fully engaged.
He's been aggressive.
But I'd rather have more money. I'll be honest. I'd rather we have more money.
I'd rather have more money and be up 18 points in the middle of August than be where the D's are.
I would say, though, that I'd rather have a bigger lead above 50% after I've spent millions of dollars on TV.
So an 18-point lead in the middle of August isn't big enough for Mike Pence?
No, it's not. It's not, because we're going to win in November.
You think with the money and name recognition he should be higher?
Yes.
Is John trying to stir things up a little bit? At a campaign stop recently, he said that Mike Pence should get his rhymes with grass back out to Washington, D.C. and work for the people out there instead of being here campaigning.
Yeah,
is he just trying to get some free publicity?
No, I think it's a very serious point. When we have earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes in this country, Congress does everything they can, drops what they're doing to take care of folks. Here we have the worst crisis in farming in my generation, at least probably several generations, with this terrible drought. And Mike Pence, who is a leader in the United States Congress, voted to go to recess rather than force the Senate or whatever. I know he wants to make the excuse, well, the Senate hasn't passed the bill we passed. Well, then stay there and force him to do something, because the farmers here need the help. They don't need him back here campaigning and grandstanding. They need him to get out there and pass a bill so that they get relief.
It's easy to say, but I mean, it is a political season, and you know, I don't know.
Well, he voted for something that passed. The Senate has been under Senator Harry Reid's leadership, has done basically nothing. So half the time the Democrats are talking about how Mike Pence needs to get out of Washington, and then the other half of the time they're talking about how he needs to go back to Washington. So, you know, consistent with a campaign that's down 18 points less than 100 days out of the election, this is what you're getting. He comes out with this kind of feel-good ad, Mr. Gregg does, and then he follows it up with this completely classless remark at this press event. It's a campaign in complete disarray, and that's one of the reasons why Mike Pence has, as you said, a commanding lead.
All right, let's talk about a race that's much closer. Richard Murdoch leading Joe Donnelly by 2 percentage points in the same poll. I don't know if anybody expected it to be this close or did expect it to be this close, but what does that tell you?
Well, I've thought since the primary was over that this is Joe Donnelly's race to lose, and I still think it's the case. I think that Chamber of Commerce poll was designed by the Chamber of Commerce to make their people look as good as they can. It's the Chamber of Commerce. I don't think anybody's surprised that they're for the Republicans in this race. Every other poll has had it closer than that or had our candidate with the lead. So I think Joe Donnelly is in great shape for the fall. Richard Murdoch is an extremist. A lot of my Republican friends were calling him an extremist in the primary season, and now they've gone silent. But I think voters in Indiana fairly much know what he is.
Well, I got paid to beat up on Richard Murdoch in the primary.
I didn't say you, but if you want to admit to it.
I never called him an extremist. Every independent poll has Richard Murdoch ahead. The poll that Kip was talking about that did have Joe Donnelly ahead, that was not an independent poll. Every independent poll has Murdoch ahead. And considering the pounding that he took in the primary, it's remarkable that he has a lead at all. 1 or 2 points. We've all said, all of us, Laura, Kip, Abdul, we've all said this is going to be the closer race of the two by far, and the chamber poll has confirmed that.
All right, less than 3 months to go. It's going to be an exciting time. Robert, Kip, guys, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Todd.
Thank you.
Make sure to stay up to date on political news anytime by following our insiders, Laura, Robert, Kip, and Abdul on our Capitol Watch blog. You can find the link on our webpage, theindychannel.com. Indianapolis This Week continues right after this. Today marks the final day of the Indiana State Fair, and it's not going to be a light one by any measure. Let's take a look at just some of the events at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. From now until 3 o'clock, the Indiana State Fair Open Car Show is taking place right on Main Street. At noon, the State Fair Queen Pageant will be in the Pepsi Coliseum. And if you haven't gotten your fill of Midway rides yet, take advantage of the Last Blast Midway Special. Unlimited rides for $25 from noon to 10 p.m. It's Pepsi Gospel Music Day on the free stage from 4 to 9:30 tonight. Also at 4:30, get ready for the Lucas Oil Demolition Derby happening at the Hoosier Lottery Grandstand. Admission for that is $5. And then at 5 p.m., tractors will head down Main Street in the Pioneer Village Tractor Parade. And that's it for this edition of Indianapolis This Week. I'm Todd Connor. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.